what I'm going to be talking about is a little bit added on to the standard thing we would do talking about the bears of Missouri. Because because of this particular group, I want to focus down on a little bit on some of the bears we've had in Christian County. So we're going to be talking about black bears. Now, grizzly bears, the brown bears that you hear in Alaska, et cetera, that's a different breed. Uh, this particular bear that you see here was at the end of Highway W, which is just about 2 miles south or east of Ozark, and then 10 or 12 miles south of there. And it was visiting a set of bird feeders, as you can see. Now, okay. So we are located, here's Ozark. We are located, our land is on Bull Mills, which is on Bull Creek, south and east of Ozark, as you can see up here. And we bought that land in 95 and expanded it. And then the last 16 years when I retired, we dove into nature and conservation work. There are 16 subspecies of brown bears. I don't think we're particularly interested in that subspeciation of them, but this shows the map of where brown bears occur at the current time. And you can see there are species that are down in Mexico and in Florida. So the history of black bears in Missouri is about a 200-year recorded history, because before that, there was no one here recording it. The Native Americans were harvesting bears, but they weren't writing it down. So Schoolcraft in 1818 discussed the bears and the use they had by settlers. Bear hides were a very important source of income when the subsistence farmers that would be here would hunt for food. Bear bacon was considered a delicacy. Bear hides were $1 a piece, and that's in 1840s dollars. The bears were hunted so heavily with unregulated hunting that by 1927, there were only a few bears in the Boot Heel. 1950, there were 2 killed in the Ozarks, and we didn't know if those were even native. And then 1990s, there were 55 sightings in 26 counties. But that's because they've been starting to import bears. And now the population in 2008 was up to 300 to 500. So the Ozark Highland population started about 1957 when Alaska introduced 200 bears, bringing them down from Minnesota, Michigan area, and repopulating. So by 2014, it was estimated that there were 7,000 black bears in the interior highlands. That's this whole area here. Now, as we saw that there were increasing numbers of bears, the Missouri Department of Conservation responded by starting a study to study how big a population we had, how quickly they were growing, how the bears lived. It's important to educate the public on living with bears and to develop a long-term management plan. So in 2009, we had reported the sighting of a bear on our land to our conservation agent. And so when they started the study in 2010, he recruited us to be one of the first places to set up a place to trap the bear and do collaring, the studies we're going to be talking about. Unfortunately, we never got to trap a bear there because they kept catching them about 3 miles away, which they were on their way to our address. I'm sure they knew where we were. So let's talk about some of the bear facts. Bears have very poor vision nearsighted. That is, they can see things close up, but not far away. You'll hear about bears standing up on their hind legs, and usually that's because they smell something. Their smell is excellent. They can follow a scent of fish oil on a rag that's held up as bait for 3 miles. They can focus in on it, but they're standing up, looking around, saying, "What's out there?" Because I can smell something, I hear something, but I don't know that you're there. and their hearing is very acute. The intelligence of a bear is equal to a 3-year-old human. They're one of the most intelligent mammals known. They have excellent navigation skills. As you'll be seeing, I'll be showing you an example. They have long-term memory. They can remember where they found food, like a bird feeder, and come back 5 years later and say, "Oh yeah, I remember where that was." They figure things out, and they're very quick learners. So bears on a move. They have a navigation ability that's better than ours. They can move by dead reckoning, as I'll be showing an example of. They can run up to 30 miles an hour, so you can't outrun a bear. They've been known to swim as far as 5 miles. And as I said, with that excellent long-term memory, put all those things together, they can be anywhere. And you can't outclimb a bear. As this is from the Missouri Department of Conservation. And that you can see it's a collared bear on a game camera. And here come the kids, but he's not quite sure this is such a good idea. So he's kind of looking, this is kind of, I don't think so right now. So I think I'll go back down. Bears know from the start, as soon as they're big enough to climb, that's the way that cubs escape danger. And you'll see some examples of that. And they scoot right up there. So once they're up there, this is a cell phone camera picture of a bear by a guy in a tree stand for deer. Oh, wow. And it's pretty close up view.
Yeah.
Fortunately, it looked around and said, "Okay, I think I've had enough." There has been at least one case where they've bopped the bear in the head at the nose to try and make it go down. So, what do bears eat? Well, bears are opportunistic omnivores. And by that, we mean that they will eat anything that they can find. So 90% of their diet is vegetarian. You wouldn't have thought of that maybe, but they go for berries, grasses if they have to, all kinds of nuts and fruits, corn. They'll find a cornfield, they'll dig into the corn, and they eat a lot of acorns. That's the acorn and mast is a major part of their diet at the right time of year. But they will eat insects. They'll break into a beehive, and they will, and that's a problem for landowners that are raising bees. They'll break into it and eat all of the larvae here while the bees are stinging them, and they're paying no attention to it. They'll find ant nests. If they find something dead or even a wounded or sick deer or a fawn, they will eat that. Eggs, bird eggs, turkey eggs in particular, and larvae of insects. So this is a picture of my wife, Barb, standing by a big oak tree, and these branches you see were broken off by bears. There were scratch marks all over here, and they were up breaking those branches down to get to the fresh green acorns before they were even ready to fall. And this was a picture below that tree. There is bear scat with all kinds of things that it has eaten.
A lot of acorns.
Yeah. So hibernation, that's always a question. In Minnesota and up north, bears hibernate. Here, we don't use that term as much. They will den, and they'll stay in that den for several months. Their temperature and pulse, however, remain stable, whereas a true hibernator, the temperature and their pulse drop way down. Their breathing and metabolism does slow down, and they sleep during that time, don't eat or drink, they don't urinate or defecate, although they will wake up on a warm day sometimes and go out in our area, but they'll be down for about 3 to 4 months. And they will lose up to 20% of their weight. And so they do wake up for cubs. If female has cubs, they'll wake up, maybe groom them some. if the calluses on their paws will dry up and peel off because they're not using them, not walking on them, and the skin is growing, and they will even eat those calluses. So their diet varies a lot by season. So they wake up hungry in the spring, they've lost 20% of their body weight, and they're ready to eat anything they can find. And there's not as much out there. There's young shoots, tree buds, grasses, wetland plants, insects, and they'll be looking for various insect sources. In the summertime, of course, there's fruit and berries and soft mast and buds and drupes. That's fruits that have the nuts in the center. And in autumn, when they're getting ready to quote, hibernate, they overeat. They eat everything they can find, and they eat lots and lots of hazelnuts. Oak acorns are big. They'll compete with the turkey and unfortunately with our feral hogs to get to those. And so they'll eat hundreds of acorns a day. They'll raid squirrel nest caches. They're eating fall fruits, pawpaw and persimmon, and ants and grubs. And they're going to be looking for human refuse, bird seed, dog food, garbage, anything that they can find. This is a good example of that. This was a log that was on our land. It was about 10 feet long, and it was about 14 inches in diameter. It had been laying there rotting for a couple of years. I went up a couple of days later on the ATV looking around, and this log had been rolled over and it had been scraped out. And this is what we call a bear trough. What happens is the bear straddles it lengthwise and goes down and digs it up, digging up the beetle grubs and the ants that are in there. And then, didn't need that. They will eat all kinds of insects, particularly those grubs that are in there in large numbers. So I want to talk about bear cubs. First of all, let's say that bears mate in the spring, and then they hold those eggs, those fertilized eggs, which don't develop until the fall when they crawl into their den. Then the babies grow. The babies are born in the den while they're sleeping, and the babies nurse while they sleep. This strikes my wife as being a very good deal, and she was wishing she could have done that. But you know, we are what we are. So in January or February, they're born 2 to 4 cubs. They're about 9 inches long, and they're blind and toothless and very, very cute. 2 months later, they will be leaving the den. Their mother can actually sometimes moves them, picks them up by the nape of the neck and her mouth, and they've been known to carry them as far as a mile away if for some reason they need to move them. They will stay with the mother until the next winter, and then they'll break off on their own. So here's a little bit of bear cub action.
Oh.
This is why I was asking Aaron about, is there going to be kids here? Because we've got some good stuff for kids.
Well, hopefully we'll have some kids watching at some point. Because, yeah, I'm sure
all
they
ages.
love it. Oh, yeah. They're adorable.
So this shows you how cute they can be. And they can complain if they're worried, as we'll hear. These are all filmed from the Missouri Department of Conservation. So the Missouri Department of Conservation saw that we were having more and more bears, and that can be a problem. And so they did a bear study. It started a bear study in 2010, and we were lucky enough to be involved in that, and stayed with it for a long period of time. The questions that they had were, what's the distribution and range? Where do they occur? We need to get humans to know how to live with bears, because the bears probably aren't going to be as good about living with humans. We need to know how many bears Are they reproducing and how fast? How many males and females? It would tell us how rapidly they're reproducing. And how many cubs are surviving to adulthood? And where do they den? So the information that they had from 2004 through 2017, these are people's reports. Our report would have been right down in here. And so they kept track of the reports they had of bears each year. And in doing so, they kept track of one other thing, and that is where they were having problems. Was it, gee, there's a bear? Isn't that cool? Or was it, I've got a problem bear, you've got to help me with it? So one thing that we've discovered is that the range of the bears are expanding. You might expect if the numbers are expanding, the females have to find another place so it's not too crowded. They're kind of like us. They don't want to get too crowded. So these are areas that it's expanding to. And you notice up here is just on the outskirts of St. Louis. So that's also a problem concern. So what they were doing, we were first of all trapping bears and putting on a GPS collar. That collar fits around the neck of the bear. It stays on battery, sending off signals regularly to where the bear is so that you can track the bear's movement from day to day. They put those on the internet, but there was a 10-day delay before they put them out, so people couldn't go out and find a particular bear.
Right.
The collar was set so that when the battery wore out, the collar falls off. And once the collar stops moving, they know where it is. They can go out, recapture it, the collar, put new batteries in it, and use it again. The other thing that they were doing was collecting hair samples. What we do for that, we would put down a barbed wire 18 inches above the ground in a triangular or pentagonal, square, whatever, with bear scent in the center. That's this bear scent here. And that lure was usually fish oil. As I said before, they can smell that from up to 3 miles away. The bear comes in and goes over the barbed wire, could go under it for a small bear, and either way leaves a little tuft of hair there. They can then take that hair in and do the DNA on it and say, oh, the DNA of this bear was over here 10 miles, and then it was over here. And they can chase that bear around, particularly if it's been a collared bear, then it's even got a number and it's got a tag on its ear.
Interesting.
So the trapping of the black bear, you could first have to know, what do bears like to eat? And if you know Yogi Bear, hey, jelly donuts. So the initial thing that they were doing was putting out lures like fish oil to drag the bear, to call the bear in, and then putting out day-old pastries, going to Krispy Kreme, to Walmart, picking up all their pastries, bringing them out, and we put out a couple pounds of pastries at a time, keep refreshing it. Another lure, they could put other lures out in jars with holes poked in them. Now, nowadays, they no longer do this, and that's because this is a human food. There's no need of getting the bears excited about human food. So they have switched now, and they use fish, rotting fish, and other things that the bears would be attracted to, but wouldn't necessarily say, oh, that's human food.
Right.
These are pictures from our trap site, which was, I mentioned, we never got a bear. There's a string where the bait or the lure would be. We got a lot of fat raccoons. I used to joke that by the end of this, we were finding insulin syringes out there because they were becoming diabetic. But you can see this was the very first year of the study. That was October 2010. This was one of my better pictures. If you look at this, you can see there's a deer. You can see kind of it ground dug out there. That's where the raccoons have been eating so much that it lowered the ground about 6 inches. And up here in front is a timber rattlesnake. Measuring it this sassafras leaf, measuring it, this measured over 5 feet long.
Oh, yeah.
So there was a lot of wildlife going through there.
Mm-hmm. Hmm.
So another way of one way of baiting and catching them was a leg snare, and what that would be, there would be actually they use ceiling tiles like acoustic ceiling tiles that they put into the ground here. There's a pit there, so it's about 18 inches deep, and they put the food out there. When the bear puts its paw in there, it plunges down, and a snare trap goes around its leg and holds it there. And then they can come in and anesthetize the bear and collar the bear and do the studies.
Hmm.
So this was the second bear they caught, bear number 1002. And this bear was weighed, as you can see, 185 pounds. It was caught on a foot snare.
Hmm.
Barrel traps were another way that they did it. You would put the bait in here, the bear crawls in, the guillotine type door comes down and holds it. You've got holes to poke through to anesthetize the bear. And you got the problem of getting in there and dragging the bear out, which is not fun. Bears sometimes took offense at that. You can see where they've turned this trap over even. And this was from August of 2010. So this is very early in the experience. They later developed some trailers, bigger trailers that they could leave out there to trap bears in a better way. No matter how, you had to anesthetize the bear. This is a bear in a leg trap, and it's being shot with a dart with the anesthetic, with the sedative, sedatives. That was our conservation agent, Brad Jump. And this is Jeff Behringer, appropriately named Behringer because he was the head of the bear study.
Mm-hmm.
So this is Devereaux Ridge, 2013, and this was a place where they had leg trapped a bear, and they're going to shoot the anesthetic into it. And you see over here is some of the food that they had, and here is one of the babies that's crawling up. So soon as this shows up and mama's in trouble, the bears climb a tree the young bears climb a tree to get away. This is a pretty good size one there, but
Yep.
This October. So this one's about 8 months old. So, and it's going to complain about its treatment. And there's another picture of them up in the tree. And they're not happy. Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Mm-hmm.
So we can play that for a long time.
Oh, I'm sure.
So this is one of the biggest bears that they trapped. 485. I don't know if it's a record now. This was 6 or 7 years ago. But you can see the size of the paw on that bear. Now, when they have that bear anesthetized, they take over 20 measurements. They measure virtually everything, including having that bear on this sling, and they raise it up and weigh the bear. So they're measuring the length, girth, etc. They remove one tooth, one of the premolars, which is not really necessary for the bear to eat with, and they can slice it up and tell about the bear's nutrition, if it's a female, when she had cubs, because it affects it just like tree rings. And they medicate the eyes and cover it so they won't get damaged during that time. And they put the collar on. The collar is fastened on with nuts and bolts, but it falls off electronically over here when the time comes. So after that, it's really important to protect the bear, because if a big male came along or something else that thought it was dead, it might injure it. So somebody has to stay with it. I got to do that once. It was a real thrill. Just me and my bear repellent, watching this bear wake up and nodding its head and finally getting up. So this is the tale of Little Dummy. Little Dummy was a bear that was collared very close to our land in June of 2011. He was a healthy young male, 120 pounds. He was caught again in 2012 and they removed his collar. At the time they collar them, they also put an ear tag on that is yellow for female or blue for boy, and it has a number on it. So if that bear is trapped again, they can look back on their records and say where it's gone, because that collar, that tag will be with that bear for its entire life.
Mhm.
Now, they called him Little Dummy because he was caught regularly 3 or 4 times a year, and he would come back in, and they call him Dummy because he was dumb enough to get trapped. But I argued with Jeff that this bear was smart because it learned it could crawl in, eat a whole load of donuts, get a shot, get drugs, sleep it off, and get up and go find another load. So, Dummy, it had trained 3 highly trained wildlife biologists to go out to Walmart to get donuts to bring in for it. Who's the dummy here?
That's true.
Anyway, we've gone around that for many a time.
Mhm.
This is Little Dummy. 4 years later, this is my wife looking into the trap. I'd been called because the agent had trapped this bear about 5 miles away. It was a overcast morning, and his flashlight batteries went dead. So I came over. We were hoping to read the tag on its ear. It was worn enough that we couldn't see it through the trap. And so, but it turned out that it was Little Dummy. So this is a shot that I took right where Barb's looking through. This was the eye looking at it. He was not sedated. He's just kind of waiting to get up and go. And you can see the ear tag here.
Mhm.
If you look carefully, you could also see he's got a bunch of ticks on him.
Hmm.
So at that time, you could follow where the bears went on the Black Bear Project. And this was Little Dummy, Bear 1117. And this is places that he was tagged, or that he was seen from his collar. And when that was running back in the day, at that time you could see live, you could see up until a week before where the bear had been. And if you clicked on any one of these, it would tell you the time, the date that it was there. So you could really track a bear around. And this was our land right in here. And this is a close-up when you zoom in. So on September 4th, 2011, today, that's a year after he was first tagged, but he's still wearing his collar. This is our house right here on Bull Creek. Go straight down Highway W, east of Ozark for about 10 miles. You get on a Red Bridge Road, and where you cross the Bull Creek on the Red Bridge, that's where we are.
Okay.
And that's where this road crosses here. So this is the house. Here's where Little Dummy was that day. And we had a game camera out that time. And this is Little Dummy on the game camera, which was located right down here. So we just extremely fortunate that everything fell together. Couldn't do that again in a million years. So then they've been doing bear den studies ever since then. And the bear den studies, they find the collared bear, go out, trace down the female, and we'll show some pictures of that in just a minute here. But this shows the areas that they're starting to move into in their dens, and which means that population is going to be staying up there. The boys travel long distances. The girls stay pretty close. And so if she has a pack up here, it has some babies, they're probably going to be in that region for some time.
Hmm.
So bears den in caves, in ground nests, with just protected areas, under overturned roots and brush piles, and in hollow trees. This particular tree was on our land, and we saw a bear climb into it. The hole was high up, about 15 feet up. It was the opening. This is after it came down a couple of years later.
Hmm.
But you can see it could hold a pretty good sized bear.
Yeah.
That, by the way, for identification purposes, is not a bear. So bear den activity. This comes from the Missouri Department of Conservation, and I think it's pretty self-explanatory, but this bear has come out during the winter, and now it's been out and crawling back in. This has been edited heavily, so this is compilation. All kinds of things come up, and check it out. Here comes a field mouse, wood rat. We quiz kids when they're watching this on what they think they are. I think you know what this one is. Raccoon. Another bunny. Now it's in the snow. Squirrel escaping, all in the same hole. Another raccoon. We're coming to my very favorite here in a minute. There's a possum. Plunk. And armadillo.
Oh, yeah. Oh. The step there.
So, and this is here for a close-up. So, going to talk about the 400-mile bear. Interestingly, this bear was bear 1417. What could be more appropriate for a Christian County bear than having a 417 area code? Right. So this was captured in 2014 up on Cobb Ridge, which was just about a mile from our house, but it was not our trap, unfortunately. So they trapped it, they put on the collar. It was 80 pounds, a young male. Now, at that time, it was hanging out around here. This again is our house, and it was on our glade and up into our woods, up into the Oak Hickory forest. Now, this is a compilation of where it was when they collared it, and then they put another collar on it later. You can see at the time you were looking at it, it was hanging around here in October of 2014. Then it shows up trapped and collared up here in 2016, just east of St. Louis. So it's up here in May of 2016. And then June, late June, it's come all the way down here and is roaming all the way around here. This is a young male, and he's looking for love. He's looking for females, and the males range quite a distance, but this one was particularly striking, and that's why they called it the 200-mile bear for the first trip up here. And I refer to it as a 400-mile bear. But you can see it does a lot of traveling.
Oh, yeah.
Now, how do we study a bear den? Well, you've got a bear that's collared, and it's sending out a signal. And so we're going in, I'm going in, they were kind enough to invite me in on this one, and they've got a radio antenna. It looks kind of like the old-fashioned TV antenna that they walk around, and it's directional so they can follow the signal. And we're headed up into here because that's where they're getting the signal. So by walking around quietly, not talking, we eventually say, all the signals coming from right in from this tree. And so Jeff Behringer, who you met before, is loading up what's called a jab stick. And this has the anesthesia in it, the thing that's going to put the bear to sleep. And he's going to go up to the bear and poke it in and jab it. And it's got a spring in it. So when he pokes in, it fires that juice in. And then he's going to get away fairly rapidly. And we're going to wait to see what the bear does. And then here comes the moment of truth. We waited silently in the distance for 30 minutes, and then Jeff goes back in and says, "Hey, bear, are you awake?" And that's why you get the bucks. That's the big job. So after that, they drug the bear out. They started doing all the measurements, removing the tooth, weighing, measuring, all of those things. This was a disappointment because what they're going out for was female bears, hoping that they're pregnant. And this particular bear, had not been mated or not successfully mated that year. So, but they get inside the den, they take measurements, they took temperature measurements of what it was like inside and outside, measured the bear's paw. This was the dental extraction that we talked about. The tooth they take out is back, would be back in here, back halfway back for the molars.
Mm-hmm.
They measure the body fat. They have something pinches onto the anal skin tags, and it can measure the body fat, nutrition, and the degree of hydration. How is the bear dehydrated or not? This had a beautiful blaze on the chest, as you can see, and this was when they're recharging the batteries on the collar, putting new batteries in. And the obligatory picture of all of us that are out there. This is me with the bear having a great time. The bear's kind of wondering what this is all about. It's starting to wake up just enough to open its eyes. And here is the device that we picked it up with, a sling, and it's going to be used to drag it back into here. And so one person's going to go in, pull the bear in, then hold the bear while they pull this sling out and leave the bear with covering for the eyes until it wakes up. You can see the yellow tags on the ear. Those are numbered, as I mentioned. So the current goal is to measure the survival of bears. How long are they living? How well are they living? Their nutrition, etc. To measure the female productivity. What are the odds that a female is going to have a baby, and how many does she have, 2 to 4, and how well they live or how many live. And by doing that, we can forecast the population growth. So identify the areas that they're traveling, kind of look ahead and say, where are they likely to expand to? I didn't mention before when we were looking at those range maps, but with those range maps, there's a lot. Frequently, you'll see a whole cluster of them in one area, and it's not necessarily that these are ones that are reported by us. But if you put a bear in Greene County, there's probably going to be 30 people that see it, and so that skews the population. But the population is expected to double over the next 10 years. So that can be a problem. Bears living with us, you got to remember that a bear is essentially a great big fat raccoon. It eats all the things that a raccoon does. It likes to get into your trash. This was our Christian County bear at the end of Highway W. So it's important that we teach people how to live with bears. You never feed a black bear, ever, ever, ever. If there are any bears in your area and you know it, or your neighbors call and say, hey, that we've seen a bear, bring your trash indoors. Or if you have there are trash containers that are bear proof. Don't leave dog and cat food out overnight. Stop feeding birds in the summertime. If the bears are reported in your area, never approach a bear. If you see a bear, back off, get your pictures, but don't go in for a close-up. And notify the Department of Conservation if you've seen a bear. They're very anxious to have your sightings, and especially if you've been threatened by a bear, because if you've been threatened, other people are at risk. So what happens to nuisance bears? Well, first of all, if you're having problems around your place, they recommend banging pans, loud noises, shouting. Sometimes they'll use rubber bullets and shotgun to make it a very unpleasant experience for the bear, make it want to go. The relocation is something that they used to do with a nuisance bear. Destruction, unfortunately, is something that we frequently have to do. The tail of Pine Ridge, this was about 4 or 5 miles from our house, up on Pine Ridge, Highway H that connects Forsyth to Chadwick. And up there, This was in 2011. Uh, but a neighbor first told me of this story, and then I got it from the bear biologist that was handling it. Uh, a family up there saw a bear down by their barn eating dog food, and they said, "Oh, that's cool. Huh. I wonder maybe we can get it closer so we can get photographs." So they started moving the dog food up closer. And by the way, I tell this story to the Wolf School, the fifth grade Wolf School, 46 students out of Bass Pro, and they figure out the answer before the people that did this down in Pine Ridge. So they're moving it closer and they're moving it closer. And they thought, wouldn't it be cool if we could get it up here on the deck and eating that dog food? So they put it on their deck and they sat on the deck, and the bear came up and ate the dog food, and they got pictures of their bear. Then they went on vacation. And this is where I ask kids, what do you think happened? Well, what happened was when they came home, their door was torn off of their house. The door was torn off of their refrigerator. The couch was totally torn up. Why? What's in your bottom of your couch? I bet, especially if you have kids, that you've got popcorn, candy, stuff in there. Anyway, they called, we've got this problem bear. You've got to do something with it. Back in that day, this was 2011, they moved the bear to another site, and guess what happened? They started getting reports of more trouble. Nowadays, a bear that's done something like that doesn't get a second chance. It gets executed for good reason, because you could have humans that could be hurt by that. So what do you do if you encounter a bear? Well, first of all, you remain standing upright. Don't climb a tree. You've already seen that that's probably not going to work. If there's a bunch of you, stay in a group. Avoid direct eye contact if you can. Pretend like you don't see it and back up very slowly. You don't want to challenge it, but speak in a calm voice, assertive voice. You can think, we were taught in Alaska to say, hey bear, so that the bear knows that it's a human voice, and don't run, because that may challenge it. And if you see a bear, report it. So the management plan originally is 350 bears in Missouri. The current estimate nowadays is 600 to 800, with an annual population increase of 9%. So there is a term called carrying capacity. And if you think about carrying capacity, think about you're a rancher, you've got cattle in a fenced in area. Carrying capacity is the number of cattle that you can have living in that area that has the crops or the food and the water that can support it. And if you had too many cattle in that space, you can't carry it, it can't support it. That's called the carrying capacity. There is social carrying capacity, and that is what we as humans can tolerate about bears. If you have a bear in your backyard in Nixa, you've probably exceeded your social carrying capacity. So the original studies, 350, now currently up to 800. Because of this, we've started a limited bear hunting season. We have to control the population. And so it's going to be from October 18th to 27th of this year. Anybody that's a citizen of Missouri can apply for a hunting permit. Only a set number will be set up. And this is the area, they're going to take 20 from Zone 1. This is where we are in Christian County down here. Zone 2, 15. Zone 3, 10. There's fewer bears up here, but there's also more population, so they have to balance those things. The hunter has to call the day of the hunt, the morning of the hunt. And if the numbers have been exceeded, they say, nope, you can't go hunting. So each day he has to get permission to go out hunting. They have to retain the edible portions, and they have to bring the bear in to be checked by a conservation agent. With time, that's going to increase. So we're probably going to have increased numbers. What are the chances of injury or death? Here is the risk of death from spiders, dogs, bees, lightning, and black bears over a 20-year period. So very, very small. And several of the black bears were people that were hand feeding them, trying to prove that the Darwin theory of extinction. So finally, why, this is a delicate subject. Why kill bears? Why would we have a bear hunting season? New Jersey has had a huge problem with this. New Jersey, this is the state of Missouri with the superimposed map of New Jersey. And in this little area, in the upstate area, they have 4,000 bears. This was 3 years ago when a student from Rutgers, a foreign student, was killed by a bear. He was with a group of foreign students. They'd never been in the United States before. They tried to outrun a bear and they went in separate directions and he was killed. On the other hand, they have had hunting seasons where they've killed up to 800 bears trying to keep their numbers down. And the general public has gone bananas about that and forced the governor to try and stop all hunting. You can imagine what that population could do. So we have a much more measured response here, trying to make certain that we have a safe balance between the social carrying capacity in Missouri and our bears. So that's all I have. And I'd be happy to, if people later on have questions, I'd be happy to field those by email. And
Absolutely. Yeah.
otherwise, I think we're all done, Aaron.